everyone. Welcome to the Tech for Eva session. For general information, for those who are not super familiar, this is a Femtech innovator accelerator based at the Bethel Innovation Park. It's been going on for now, I think, 3 months or so. And there's a group of about 110 startups that are part of this group at different levels with access to different services. So this is the menopause, incontinence, and period health focus group. And what we like to do, which is open to the public, is actually bring in experts that challenge us and make us think about the way that we manage our business and the way that we look towards the future. And the idea is to share ideas and to challenge ourselves and ask questions. So I would like to start with the Mentimeter. If Julie, you could share the slide, which then also shows what's going to be happening today. So we have 3 speakers today. The first one is Jan, who I'll introduce before he starts. He's going to be speaking about how we can think strategically about price. Brigitte's going to talk about market access in Europe. And last but not least, Jerome from P&G Healthcare about how you manage innovation during and after the acquisition. So in order to get a feel for the people we have here today, please take your mobile phone, including the speakers, and just please write Mentimeter in your browser. And then please put in the code that you see in front of you. So 47411331. Just give you a minute to do that. So just write Mentimeter in the browser. And the window should come right up. Some of you are probably quite familiar. Okay, I think we can go to the first question, Julie.
And about where is this?
And the number will stay on the slide, so there's no rush. If you have a question, please go ahead and ask it. So would like to see where you're all calling from today. The larger the word, the more people have voted for that. Geneva area, Zurich, Chicago. Mies, I think, might be Brigitte.
Yes, exactly. I was too precise. So it put me in Geneva area.
Kuznach Tamrigi, that's a nice place. And Lyon. Okay. Geneva's leading. Let's go to the next question. Okay, so this is about who you're representing today, whether you're from research, corporate, academia, startup, student, or other. And if you just joined the call and we already started, you can put Mentimeter in your browser and enter the code and answer the questions. So we have a lot of other. Give it a few more seconds. Okay.
Okay. A student joined, you see.
Okay, Julie, I think we can go. Okay, so I'd like to hear a little bit about what your biggest challenges are. Is it tech challenges, product market fit, market access, partnering, fundraising, or other? And if it doesn't apply to you, you can always say other. Okay, interesting. See that technology is not the issue. We know what we want from our technology. We want to know how to make it fit on the market, how to make sure people are paying for it, that we can partner and that we can get enough money to continue developing it. So tech is always a challenge, but I think you have that under control. Okay, thank you. We can go on. So we've got a couple more questions that relate to the first presentation we have today. And so the first presentation about pricing. So we'd like to know if you have already set the price for the product or service that you are working on. Okay, seems like it's pretty split, but 6 startups have not set the price yet. So the next question. Okay, so for the 6 of you who did set the price, could you give us an idea of how much time you spent on it? I guess some people are still reflecting here. Few months and months, 2 days, 1 day. Okay, very good. And one last question. You can give it another second. Yeah. So a few months, days, months, 1 day, 2 days, years. Okay, somebody has been very hesitant about making a decision there. And then the last question, please. Oh, okay, I guess that was it. Sorry, I confused. Okay, thank you very much. So we've got an idea about our audience, which is always useful. Welcome again. So the first talk will be from Jan Krasnodebski. It took me some years to know how to pronounce that name correctly, although it seems very easy now. So Jan studied engineering at MIT, and then he came to Lausanne to study at IMD. And fortunately for Switzerland, he decided to stay. And we've known each other since his time in Medtronic. He's really an advanced analytic and pricing expert. He also worked on that in Medtronic. He then continued to develop his expertise in that area, in banking and also in other health tech medical device area. And now he's at Expedia in Geneva, which I guess you all know is a mega multinational working in the area of travel and selling online. So it's an e-commerce giant. Jan, welcome, and the field is yours.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's particularly fun to speak to entrepreneurs and people who have yet to figure out their price, and also those who've thought about their price even for years. I've been thinking about this for years, and it's always interesting to see what's happening. And just a little tidbit, Eva is the middle name of my daughter, so I feel a bit of a personal connection to this event. So Marta, thank you for having me. I will share my screen a little bit. I'll go kind of back and forth. More than anything, the title I've put here is thinking strategically about price. I think more than anything is just hopefully in the next half hour or so can get people just, let's say, to think about price and just think about the possibilities. And if anything else, just leave the next half hour or 20 minutes with a bigger view that this is, a price is just not a number. It's not something to spend on days or weeks specifically, but it's really something that you can really think about and you can really push the boundaries in terms of what you can do. And that actually, if you push the boundaries and you really think about it, there's probably a lot that you can do, and that it links to a lot of your product strategy, to your tech strategy, that it's all integrated. And I remember once, a famous pricing expert, somebody went to him and says, "Oh, what's the best pricing strategy?" He goes, "Well, there is no best pricing strategy. the best, the pricing is to follow whatever strategy you're following. So if you're, looking to be serving billions of people, well, that's, it's a very different pricing strategy. If you don't think your product's not going to go very far and you just want to kill a competitor, which I don't think anybody's in here, but that has happened in the past in certain cases, or if you have a niche product as well. So that's the hope of this. And it's a little not entirely interactive, but if anybody has any questions or comments, please, please feel free to jump in. So again, two things hopefully that you'll leave with is that really at the end of the day, especially for those entrepreneurs out there, that you should price for the value you are providing. I know there's a lot of material out there and it says, cost base and this, but at the end of the day, if you can leave saying, yeah, what's the value that I'm providing and how do I monetize that? That I think will be something that you can take as a takeaway. And also just a few examples how, people mentioned fundraising is an issue. Well, pricing is the best way to fund your business. And many people don't actually realize that until actually go through the numbers. So before I go further, I'm just going to stop sharing because I know we have a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience and you're all going to be really super successful. And you're going to have, tens of millions, if not 100 millions of euros, francs, dollars to spend in the next, year or two, or maybe 5 years, it might take a little longer. So I'm sure everybody is going to be thinking about buying some art, because what else are you going to do with all that money that you're going to get from selling your companies or once you IPO and you do that things. Art is a great investment. If you look at it, it has a very high rate of return. It provides you joy. It's something tangible. It's inflation proof. You find the right piece of art. You really, as long as you like it and, there's intrinsic value, you don't really have to worry about it too much. So it's really a great thing in terms of an investment. You can see, the rich people go into that. But let's just, thinking about art, what's some issues of owning art? Can anybody, maybe just want to say, here I'm not an art dealer, but trying to say, go buy Picasso. But what are some issues that you can think that owning art entails? Or maybe why, if you had that sold your company, you might not want to spend it all on a Picasso or a Matisse or something like that. Any reasons?
Might buy a fake without realizing.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to scarcity and the fact that it's a unique piece, the only one in the world. And yeah. Yeah.
So there's that. So Martha, I think you put the first one up there, a fake. Am I getting something real? Oops, I'm going too far. This is a picture of a supposed artwork, a Chagall. The purchaser bought it for £100,000 and it was labeled a forgery. And subsequently it was burnt because there's a law in France that if there's a forgery in France, it gets burnt. So $100,000 was burnt. There's a lot of cases there, a museum in France, 60%. So fake is obviously a big issue. You said scarcity, that would suggest the value, but what are some of the other pain points of owning art? Why you wouldn't want to spend all your money on art?
It doesn't have practical functions.
Okay, fair enough. But, think of it as an investment. So, a stock certificate doesn't have any practical
it doesn't have a reference value. It's different people interpret it
right,
differently.
But it does have a value in that, if you look at, certain up and coming artists, yes, they will not. But the art market, if you look at it from a purely rational financial point of view, it's more stable than stocks, and it can actually outperform stocks over the long run. So take it on the fact that you're not gonna buy some up and coming artists that may turn out to be good or not, but you're looking at and after all you're all going to be super successful, so you're going to be buying Chagall's, Banksy's, the real good stuff, maybe even a Rembrandt or something. A Rembrandt is the earlier point, there's only so many Rembrandts. There's not going to be more Rembrandts. There's not going to be more Da Vinci's. What are other pain points, do you think?
Somebody said it can be stolen, it's fragile. That's what they wrote in the chat.
Right. Oh, okay, great. I just read. So exactly, stolen. That's a big one. Here are some famous works. Picasso is actually the most stolen artist in the world. He has over 1,000 artworks of his are officially stolen, and these are worth millions. There's one from the Kunsthal. There was a big heist. The Mona Lisa was stolen. Turn of the century, it was returned. They're still looking for the Rembrandt, lost at sea in Galilee, from the Gardner Museum in Boston. They're still looking for it. That was stolen in the, so it could easily stolen. Somebody else said fragile. So another point, it can be destroyed or damaged. Steve Wynn learned this. He had a Picasso, which he was going to sell, and he hit the elbow against the Picasso, and he didn't sell it afterwards. And then he had another Picasso that went to auction. It was about to go to auction, and somebody left a pole, and it fell, and it just created a hole, which devalued the painting by 20 million. Lots of artwork was lost during the war. This is, below on the bottom left, you have the famous photo of the workers on the Empire State Building. Somebody dropped it, and so they can't really make any more original prints. Washington crossing the Delaware, that was destroyed. Good point. Hard to carry. It's not portable. It's not indivisible. You either sell the whole thing as one, and it has high transaction costs. A lot of this, you just can't go sell it. It's quite expensive to sell. You usually have to sell it at auction, 15, 20% commissions, buying on the selling. That's a lot to eat up on the commission side, as you can imagine. So despite it being an incredible investment, there is a lot of disadvantage with art. Now, somebody might just kind of may know where I'm leading with this, but there is technology, and this is a tech audience, has found a solution to all these issues. Are people familiar with what that solution is called? It's sort of been a little craze right now. It's in the news. So they're called non-fungible tokens, NFTs. So you've heard of those. You've probably seen them in the news. There was one that was sold for $63 million recently. And basically, it solves all the issues of owning art. It's basically a digital print on the blockchain. And if you know about, I don't know if everybody knows about the blockchain, but that's, where Bitcoin and all these cryptocurrencies are based. It's electronic. Nobody can steal it. It's decentralized. So short of a nuclear war, you're not going to lose it. It can't be stolen. You can divide it if you want to. You can create, basically tokens out of it. So you've got this innovation where it's taken art and this added value by solving all the issues. And how much do you think that is worth, solving all those issues?
A lot.
A lot.
Very.
Yeah. And the reason I bring up this example is because these are pain points with owning something, and it's technical innovation has gotten rid of the various pain points. And what you have seen is an explosion of the value. And the people who originally created it didn't actually gain much of the value. It's actually the people down the road who exploited the value. The second most expensive piece of art, you're looking at it right now, Feisty Doggy, to the moon, approximately valued at $250 million as of August. It was purchased for $4 million in June of this year. It's a non-fungible token. It's just an electronic, address, but it's to the doggy, which is the inspiration for the doggy coin, which is a cryptocurrency that Elon Musk refers to a lot. So it kind of goes up in value. So went up in value a lot over time. But the value went from 4 million to 225 million ahead of a Rembrandt, which was the second most expensive piece of art prior to that. And that was based on the divisibility, that they were able to take the picture effectively and divide the ownership very easily, equitably, because, how do you, otherwise it's very difficult to actually do that. So here you have this little dog. It's worth $225 million. It was worth $4 million. You have crypto punks. I don't know if you know those. They were originally given for free. They're trading, for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you had the Beeple, which, first sold 63 million. And the point here is, it comes down to what is the value being delivered and what are the pain points? And these are obviously, big pain points in the art world of, you could lose your entire investment because of forgery, big risk factor. You can't sell it easily. You can't take it. You can't divide it and all these things. So it's one of those things. If you come up with innovation, really think how much that value are you creating, so you don't leave it on the table. Because literally somebody left $220 million on the table with this little dog in the course of a few months. And the CryptoPunks, which I mentioned, you may have seen pictures of them. They were given away for free by the originator, and now they're worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I'm not trying to say that pricing is easy. Pricing is actually hard work. But hopefully by that example, you can see that, there is no limit, in terms of where you should kind of box yourself. Because if a silly looking dog, which is just an electronic address, is worth more than a Rembrandt, if you value it and you can capture that value, then what are your innovations worth? And that's where the hard work comes in. A lot of it's actually pretty mental. So with that, how does everybody know how to, anybody who's been doing pricing, do you figure that you've captured most or all the value? If anybody just wants to mention in the chat or have any comments.
6 of you have done something with pricing. Maybe you have some idea.
Yeah, you look at the pricing of competition.
Yeah, somebody commented benchmarking. Yeah.
Right. Well, those are all things, but and I think the whole point around competition and benchmarking is how do you differentiate yourself? So it's one of those things where benchmarking is a way to give you a base level of value to start off with, right?
Then we had cost-based pricing plus margin, somebody else wrote.
Right. Cost-based pricing plus margin. That's interesting, but what's the cost of a non-fungible token?
Almost nothing, probably.
Yeah, it's the electricity.
Okay.
It's literally electricity and your time. It probably doesn't even amount to pennies. If you start thinking about cost-based pricing and margin, yeah, it's important to make money and to have margin, let's say, but this is where a lot of companies get stuck, and I've seen a lot of people get stuck. They think cost price plus margin, but that doesn't tell you how much you're solving a problem.
Somebody else says they'll look at what people are willing to pay or check what people are doing now as substitutes.
Right. And exactly. And I think some of the interesting ideas, the transportation, the insurance for paintings. So you can see how those NFTs are worth a lot because you don't have to have insurance. You have these cases of artwork being stolen, being forged. You really could be wiped out. You're taking on huge risk with some of these artworks. Being completely wiped out. So that if you provide an artwork without any of those risks, there's a tremendous amount of value if you start adding all those components up. And at the end of the day, yeah, what will people pay? But that comes down to, I would say again, what's the value that you're providing at the end of the day? Because somebody, if you ask me, what do you want to pay? Well, I want to pay as little as possible. And you have to be a little bit careful too when you're doing that, because you have to find the right person. So what Marta will pay for an innovation is not something that Brigitte would pay for an innovation. or that I would pay for innovation or for a product. So I think that's interesting when you say what people pay, and that really gets down into the segmentation and finding out what's the value that you're providing for somebody, and that's what they're going to pay. And if you're not talking to the right person, or you're not going to the right segment, you might be undervaluing yourself a lot. And so what I'll do is just kind of try to go through a few slides with some concept of how to align to value. And just as we're talking about it, the price should align with the customer's total perceived value, right? At the end of the day, if you get more benefits, if that person gets more benefits than the price, then they'll buy it, or they should buy it. And the benefits could be a variety, as we discussed, in terms of products. It could be the outcomes, the ease of use, the quality, the service and support, all those components. All that value that you're bringing in should be accordingly priced. And one reason I put a scale here is that, especially when you start getting into a sales minded, I have to sell, sometimes people think, a discount is a benefit. A discount is not a benefit. A discount is a reduction in sacrifice. So if you think you need to discount or lower your discount, that basically means you have a problem on the value side. So there's no such thing as a pricing problem per se, or the price is too high. In a way, the issue is, what is the value, and am I selling the value on the leg? So it's one thing just to keep in mind. The price should it's really about the value, and it's not about the price itself. What you have to pay. And in terms of trying to find the value of a product, it's easy to say, but in order to really get at the big value and to really think wide, so that where you have these NFTs, going from literally from 4 million to 200, over 200 million, it's looking at who are all the stakeholders, who are all the potential, buyers, who are the people involved in one of these things, and where do they derive the value from? As I said, with that NFT, most of the value was derived from the divisibility, which is not something that you immediately come up with, but it's something that a lot of people wanted to get in on this NFT craze, and they couldn't. They read about it, but they don't have $4 million dollars, or hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they do have $20 or $50 to buy a small fraction. And so this can give rise to a fairly structured process when you're sitting down and you want to price something. So for those who haven't priced yet, one of the first most important steps is to identify all the stakeholders, especially anybody new, anybody around the product that you're selling, or the innovation that you're working on. There's usually more than one stakeholder. And I'll go through a simple example of how to think of all the stakeholders, because it's usually the new ones that are going to be the ones who are going to be willing to pay the most, because the existing ones, or the people who've been working in a certain area for a long time, they tend to get anchored or jaded into, or just used to what's there. The people, as I said, with these NFTs, it's not, the people who got into them first, were the people who were collecting old masters. So it's first, identify the stakeholders, list all the benefits, like literally all the benefits. And then the key step there is to quantify all the benefits, to really put some monetization. And I know that can sometimes be difficult. And, I've worked with various groups, and people say, well, I'm not sure how much it's worth. But the thing you have to realize is, if you don't know how much it's worth, if you can't put a price on it, why would anybody else put one on it, right? Why would anybody voluntarily say, I'm willing to pay more, or I'm going to pay, more or for something? So it's really a key step there is, to be able to quantify the benefits. And to the, what people said before, in terms of the benchmarking, that's where, you can start to to get, the benefits because you're benchmarking against. And then it's fairly simple. Add up all the benefits for each stakeholder, and then you can convert that to a market price and optimize from there. And I noticed just someone wrote, yes, sometimes it's taken in line as the tulip mania in the Netherlands during the early 1600s. Yes, there are bubbles. That's true. And what you could have, I think that's, again, it stresses, I'm not sure if the implication is if NFTs are a bubble. They might be. At some stage they probably are, but the concept there, there's definitely a lot of value. But that gets back to the whole value proposition. How much value does a tulip bulb have?
So would you say, Jan, that when you have a bubble, whether it's the tulips or NFTs, the benefits are overblown in people's minds?
Well, that's, you could say the benefit becomes perceived, right? It's not a tangible benefit anymore. And, honestly, I don't know where NFTs sit on the bubble. It's easy to say, oh, it's a bubble because who would be, paying 225 million, but it's still very early in the game. And, again, this is about thinking wide, thinking open, because I still have friends that are convinced Bitcoin's going to crash. And, not that I'm trying to convince anybody of Bitcoin, but there's only one way Bitcoin prices have gone up in the, since it's been created. It's been a very volatile asset, but it's gone up in value. Like it's the best performing asset class, I think, 8 of the last 10 years or something like that. And then people, so it's a little difficult to see, what's the perceived value. But when you start getting into those areas, it's sometimes to think, well, what is the value there, right? And it's actually, sitting back, to what things are perceived value and it's being overblown versus others. And you could argue with tulips, it was clear as being overblown because tulips are just they're only worth as tulips, right? It's a flower. It doesn't have any productive asset. It's not divisible. They go bad. They'll be eaten by animals. They get destroyed. I have tulips. I like tulips. They might flower one year and they might not flower the other. So, so if there is a certain value to it, but then that's the fact that you can understand the value. Then you can see, is that price an appropriate one or not, or what's driving the price and how much is it is perception. All in the eyes of the buyer. It's that's true, but it's more than just the buyer. I would say it's the market, and you're not gonna, you could say Rolex isn't worth $20,000 or 15,000 francs, or I guess the cheapest one's around 7,000-8,000 francs. But Rolex is just fine to say, yeah, whatever. You don't like my watch for 8,000 francs. That's fine.
It's philosophy, I believe, because if you come with such a doodle to Africa, where they are starving and don't have drinkable water, and you'll ask them what they prefer, to have a $250 million doodle or whatever digital key, or drinkable water each day, I'm quite sure what the answer will be. And water in Africa are more valuable for them than NFTs.
Well, you could say that, of course. You could say that same with gold. Any Gucci clothing or anything like that. There's a utility. But in the case of, it's interesting that you say about Africa, and I think this is, not to get too derailed, but that is actually why NFTs and cryptos have gone up in value. That's actually the value of NFT. I'm in Africa. All I need is a cell phone. The cell phone has very high penetration in Africa. Most people are quite, it's quite a poor continent relatively. They don't have a lot of infrastructure. Most people are underbanked, but most people will have a cell phone. And with that cell phone, you can transact. So it's kind of interesting you would say that, but they would actually be quite interested in NFT and have been with Bitcoins. They're actually one of the big users. in some ways because it allows them to bank and it allows them to make transfers on their phones, which you can't do otherwise. So this is, again, thinking about the big picture. Of course, they don't really care about the doggy coin NFT, but that concept there, fundamentally, they can bank, effectively, they can get transactions, payments from, family without paying, horrible fees to Western Union, without getting robbed. So there's a tremendous value that when you start thinking, even someone in Africa actually gets a lot of benefit, in some ways gets more benefits than the people in the Western economies because of that lack of infrastructure, the lack of security, where otherwise they wouldn't be able to. And I've actually even heard of stories of a number of women businesses in Africa and Asia managing to do very well because they could actually transact in Bitcoin, because everything else they couldn't, because they were oppressed, because people would steal their money, take their money, but they had a cell phone and they could transact and keep secure Bitcoin transactions. So something
Jan, I'm just going to ask you if you have some more important slides to share, because then
Sure.
we need some time for Q&A, and then it's coming to the end of the session.
Yep, right. So coming to that value aspects, and one element when you're looking at value, to try to determine more value, you have the usage cycle, which I'd say. So how do you find the value for your product? There's the actual use of your product. And in this case, a dental implant. But when you're looking for those stakeholders for additional benefits, think about the whole cycle that's involved in the use of the product, in terms of the patient, the insurance, the physicians. What is actually the whole usage cycle before and after your product? Because a lot of the benefit might actually be either before or after. And this, one of the classic cases is the genetically modified foods, GMOs, really don't exist in Europe versus the US, because Monsanto and the producers, they went initially to the farmers and they said, look, you'll get more yield. And in the US, that was great. They went to yield. The people against GMOs and Europe went to the final users. So you have a product that was accepted in the US based on the direct user accepting it, but it was rejected, sadly, in Europe because people later in the usage cycle said, no, I don't want it. So it's something to look at both as a benefit, that you can benefit someone before or after in the usage cycle, but also it's an opportunity to look at, well, who might be against or detract from the use of my innovation or be against my innovation. Because there was one case with in Canada with surgical implants for hips. They saved time and money in terms of recovery time, but they required a little more time in the operating room. And for the longest time, they weren't successful in Canada because the physicians were being charged for the operating room time against their virtual budgets. And even though people were going out of the hospitals faster, days faster, they weren't benefiting from it. It was the system was benefiting from it, but it was looking at the whole cycle, like who's getting the benefits and who's not getting the benefits. It's quite important if you want to get that full value. And when you're talking about the baselines, you're talking about the full value. It's great to start with the baseline, right? That's where you start with the price potential. And what I would say is when you do that, first start with all the differential values that you can bring to the table that are better. So what have you developed that's better than the latest or way of solving the problem? And if you have a real big innovation, sometimes the baseline is quite crude to what's been done before. But there's always a baseline, and you build up from that. And then to be realistic, you need to take away some factors. But that is a way of also thinking about your value. And as I said, once you do that, you could just put it in a simple spreadsheet or even a piece of paper. I've done it on the back of envelopes, even with big companies to come up with pricing where you just, you list out the stakeholder, you live the benefits, you quantify them, you add them up, and then that gives you the price potential. And it's really, you look at the stakeholders and then you can really understand what's the true value of your innovation. So this is just an exercise. If people want to do it, is identify all the stakeholders that you have, list all the benefits and try to quantify one benefit. In interest, this, as I said, this is more for something that you might want to do on your own. And in terms of pricing is a way to fund your business. If you just look at the numbers, pricing is the most important profit lever. If you look at, this is a standard company, successful med tech or even pharma company. The costs are 100. Sorry, the revenue is at 100. Total costs are 80. Profits 20. A 5% in price change. If you take that as a discount, your revenue goes from 100 to 95. Doesn't sound so bad, but your profit goes from 20 to 15, which is a 25% reduction. So anything you do on price, keep in mind it's multiplied in terms of your actual profit and how you money. And just as an example, this one was I was personally involved with it. Actually, the last thing I did with Medtronic when I left, so I didn't actually get to have all the the benefit with it, but the industry had it afterwards. Are transcatheter valves. It's a $5 billion market today. Basically, in the old days, when you get old, over 70, your valves start failing. Your heart, the aortic valves, and they need to be replaced. Usually they were done with mechanical valves, sometimes porcine tissue valves. But you're looking at a price of $2,000 to $5,000. But you had to, put a person on a heart-lung machine, stop their heart, do all that, cut them up, put the valve in, sew it all up. Transcatheter valve, you get rid of all that, you just place it in. And that was one where the pricing, people were adamant that the pricing should only be $5,000. The current typical valve at that time was $2,000 or so. So 5,000 sounded big. I actually had the opportunity to talk to someone from Edwards who said they were really going to try to push the envelope and charge $15,000 for their valve when they go out with it. In the end, Medtronic got the jump in a niche market with some convincing and released it at $25,000. So 5 times of what people internally thought. And ultimately, this is one of the most successful marketplaces. And I would argue it's because of the pricing, because of the pricing, the product has a 75% gross margin. Because of the pricing, $800 million in R&D is spent a year, 1.4 billion in sales and support and all those components. So it's also something to think very much of when you're looking to price. That value, if you don't capture it, that's lost value to R&D and to grow your therapy and to get your innovation into other people. So that's a 29-minute mark and hopefully get some people thinking.
Let's open it up to some questions from the floor. I think we had a little discussion, but so practically, Jan, what's the first thing you need to do is in terms of an exercise, you really need to think of your key stakeholders, list all the benefits, and then try to see where you're better from the competition, where you add value, where maybe value is detracted, and really try to put a monetary value to that, right?
Right, and think of that whole usage cycle. Think of all the advantages and disadvantages of how your product or innovation is used, because it's not maybe just in that narrow component, because then if you just think in a narrow component, you'll probably put yourself in a narrow price range, and you might get blindsided with a stakeholder who says, oh, it's not worth it.
Anything else from the audience? I know we had questions or comments as we went along. Could there be a different price for different stakeholders?
Definitely. We saw it when we priced our devices and service. Of course, there is regional differences, and even in Europe, different countries will pay different prices for the same goods. Um, we started building our strategy bottom up and top down. So pricing plus costs and so on gave us the lower limit, and then some other restrictions of reimbursement and current pricing of competitors gave us the upper limit. And then in between, we tried to find our way. We did health economic study, quite a wide one, that gave us a very precise answer regarding the margins, and it's based on quality. Basically, I don't know if many knows it. Each country has a value for person's life. Okay, so I assume that in Switzerland, the value of
We're
person's
not hearing you very well. You're coming in and out.
life is like, and a person the person's cost per
Nimrod, we're not hearing you very well, but I think
countries.
your
It's
point is
worthless.
well made. I mean, we're not
Okay.
hearing you very well. You're going on and off. Your line is bad. Sorry. But your point is well made, and I think it fits well with the next presentation that
Just one comment on that before I leave. A very good point was made, with the health technology assessment. One thing to keep in mind is when that's going to happen and where are you with the innovation? Because I've seen a lot of people limit themselves saying, oh, I have to meet the health technology assessment values today. But keep in mind, especially with medical devices, you could be on a very drastic curve. And that was the case with transcatheter valves. When they first came out, they weren't cost effective. They wouldn't have met any hurdle, but they were experimental and they weren't being put to that test yet. So it's just one thing to keep in mind, the timing of the various elements, and not to sell yourself short.
Good point. So I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to stop the discussion there as we need to move along. Thanks a lot, Jan. So I think the end of this discussion fits well with the next presentation by Brigitte Castiles. Brigitte is a market access and reimbursement specialist. She's worked in many different companies, including Baxter, Medtronic, Kyphon, so with spine surgery and Stryker. And after this extensive multinational experience, she's become an independent consultant, and I think she's acquired even more experience because the therapeutic areas that she's dealt with are wide and reach far. She's also very knowledgeable in terms of many key markets: Germany, France, Italy, Belgium, Benelux. She speaks all those languages, so it's a real privilege to have you here, Brigitte, and I hand over to you.
Thank you, and I will first try to share the right presentation. Just a second. I hope it's correct. Do you see the presentation?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, great. So yes, I think it was great to have Jan indicating all the some good points which we will be addressing here, because the market access or getting the reimbursement from your biggest buyer or the biggest stakeholder is quite often one of the big pain points, to use Jan's expression, of startup companies and even of larger companies, because what we shouldn't forget is for those therapies that for treating diseases, your biggest customer is really the healthcare systems and getting those devices or procedures or diagnostics reimbursed.
So Brigitte, we forgot to do the Mentimeter. Would you like to quickly hear from the audience?
The Mentimeter?
Yeah, yes. the feedback on the questions that you sent.
Of course.
Would you like it? Okay, so sorry, we forgot about that. So Julie, if you could share those so we could just ask the audience 2 short questions, and then we can go right back to Brigitte. Apologies for forgetting that.
It's on the same one as before?
Yes, it's coming up. Okay.
Oh, no, it's a new code?
Yes, the new code. Next slide, please. Okay, so did you consider market access in your product development strategy? And the code is on the top.
I must say, I can't get in. Maybe nobody gets in.
Maybe you need to get out from the previous and go back in.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Let's give people a few seconds to get back in.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. More than half.
And then, yeah, I still love that question. Okay. And the next question, please. And the same thing, did you include market access considerations in your clinical strategy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. Good. At least half of the people thought about it, and almost half considered it for the clinical strategy, which is great. So, do I need to share again?
Yes, please.
Okay. Here we go again.
You're sharing, yeah.
Yes. So in my presentation, I will quickly go through the some points on the European healthcare systems, market access strategy points to consider, and then a bit on HTA. Everything obviously not in depth. It's we're flying over a very big issue or a very big topic, and it's just a short review if you want. So if in Europe we have 26 countries, there are 26 healthcare systems, and even within those different healthcare systems, regional decision makers can also influence the access to your therapy. So starting from a CE mark, which maybe opens you the market for in most European countries, at least in all EU countries and Switzerland, There are other requirements that will be met, have to be met before being able to talk about real market access. So you're not talking about just serving 1 or 2% of the target population, but being able to serve all the patients that could be eligible for your technologies. And we're speaking there about health technology assessment requirements. Jan quickly talked about that. Budget and financing systems. So you may have the ideal technology, but if the healthcare system doesn't have the money to pay for it, or you're not within their priority areas, because you know that governments make priorities, and we're going to treat pay big attention to cardiac care, to elderly, etc. If at that point you come with a Parkinson's disease treatment, if it's not in their priority area, it may be more difficult to get the financing. And then once you have done all that, there's still procurement and tenders that you need to address. So this, as I said, there's many different systems. You have healthcare systems, social healthcare systems versus taxation. There's systems that are funded by reimbursement. So really, I get something and there's a reimbursement for that treatment, or benefit in kind, like in the UK, you go to the hospital and everything is already paid for because the hospital is financed in its globality. Centralization, like in a lot of European countries, versus regionalization, where decisions are taken at the regional level, like, for instance, in Italy, where you have 21 regions deciding not completely autonomously, but for very big part at their level on the funding of innovation and of new devices. Free access versus controlled access. What I mean by that is, if you come with an innovative technology, for instance, in the German hospital market, as long as your technology is codable and as the payment level is high enough, you can just enter the system once you have CE mark. Opposed to the French healthcare system, where for innovative care, you need to first address the requirements of the HAS, the High Health Authority, and get through that door, actually. So as I said, there can be an access barrier at market access. There can be an access barrier later, meaning that if you were very successful in getting into your German market without presenting any data, because it's not required initially, well, the Joint Federal Committee can come back later at the request of probably the health insurances, most of the cases, and ask you to present your clinical data. And at that point, they're even much more difficult than the French healthcare decision makers in the level of data they require, because they know actually that you're already on the market, so that you should have done your homework on getting your clinical data in order. The common issues between those healthcare systems is there is an increased use of health technology assessment for decision making on the admission of innovative technologies, and whether it be early in market access or later. But with the cross-border directive, and now with the upcoming EU regulation on health technology assessment, also those countries that were actually very much behind on that topic are getting up to speed and will be able actually to use the reports made by the larger countries, or by those countries that are already much advanced with health technology assessment, and can just take those reports over and take their decision based on those, which is all very positive. Is if the first assessment is positive. It is a much bigger issue if your first assessment is negative. So that's something really to keep in mind and to ensure that you're prepared to answer to those agencies. At the same time, the healthcare cost pressure is increasing. There's cost management measures that are being taken by governments, and that, for instance, in France, they can all of a sudden decide that the whole group of devices, such as, for instance, embolization coils. I'm clicking here without knowing what I'm doing. So the embolization coils. So they take them as a group of devices, and they just decide, well, we're going to have to cut that group of devices with 10% on the price. And then there's a discussion with the industry, but it invariably ends up with price cuts. And if you remember one of the last slides from Jan, if you get that 5% price cut, it might be cutting much deeper into your benefit margins. We're moving, even though there is a big attention to health technology assessment, financial decision making is getting a very big influence on those technologies that are being accepted and not. And sometimes it's a bit in a hidden way, in the sense that you get financial considerations within a health technology assessment that should not, at the onset, be looking at prices and at cost effectiveness. But in the end, those conversations come up in the decision-making committees, and it does influence the final decision. And then use of tendering for medical devices that are considered commodities is becoming very, very frequent. And don't mistake the word commodities as being something old. Yeah, so very easily decision makers put everything into a bucket. Oh yes, this is a heart valve, or this is a catheter, and they take very technologically advanced products mixed with others and write out a tender. So it can be very negative, have a very negative impact on innovation. Talking about setting up your market access strategy in Europe, if you have a innovative device which you're going to put on the European market, it is very important to have one strategy and adapt it locally. Being one strategy, I mean the patient population, for instance, the way that the technology is being put on the market. So prioritizing, for instance, inpatient care opposed to outpatient care, even if outpatient care would be possible. But if you do a different strategy in different countries, it may be negatively perceived in the country where you're following a strategy which is more costly for, or perceived more costly for their systems. There has to be an alignment between your clinical strategy and your market access strategy. That's really very important. If you go for reimbursement, for instance, with the French authorities, you have to be very clear about the indication for which you're going to ask reimbursement. If that indication does not correspond to the indication or the criteria for patient inclusion in your major clinical trials, you will have a very hard time in getting reimbursed. So that's just to say, make sure that those things are aligned. And your strategy has to be based on a thorough due diligence of the market. What do I mean with that due diligence? And it's a way that I very often propose to companies to go through. What am I going to present as a benefit will depend also on the due diligence that you will be doing. So is there already, so what you're asking yourself, is there already funding reimbursement code in the main countries? So could the product be used already without any work? In some cases, it's actually quite possible. So instead of setting up a big strategy, you could already get some funding at a short term. Would the current tariff and funding be sufficient to cover the new product? Well, that's after obviously you have decided with Jan what your pricing would be. And which other products are covered under the same coding. So if you decide, well, in Germany, there's a fantastic code, actually it describes my product, but you see that on the same code, they're all very cheap products. Well, then there's no advantage in saying that you're the same. Actually, you should be crying, should be yelling and saying, well, no, I'm different. I need another code because this code is not, it does not describe my product. Because if otherwise what you risk is a price erosion. If it's also a very busy market, then you also risk a price erosion because, the more busy, the more competition, the more prices will go down. There could be risks of perverse incentives in the sense if you go on that the hospital can have a perverse incentive to use one code compared to another, or to use one reimbursement compared to another if it pays higher, but then this could be negative in the future. And obviously there's a risk that if you choose a code in that you think is appropriate, but it's not accepted by the healthcare system, well, you should certainly not have advised that to the hospitals, because then that's considered frauding. So what you should look at is also, what is the process? What are the timelines? And what data do I need to obtain a new code, to obtain a new reimbursement? What are the alternative treatments? What are their codes, their tariffs, what budget is being spent there, and which is the most interesting comparator? So if you have the choice amongst different comparator or different standard treatments, you would like to use in your trial the one that is compared to which you have the most benefit, obviously, but also compared to a technology that is quite expensive. If you're comparing to a very cheap product, that's not going to help you getting a premium price. And I can remember of discussions, and that was more in the pharma market, where new antibiotic drugs compared to very cheap early antibiotics, and then they were very surprised that their price was just about 10% higher than that comparator. And it's very logical. You're comparing to them. So what should the healthcare decision maker do? They do the same as well. They follow your trial. They follow what you demonstrated. And then when you choose a comparator, is it an acceptable comparator in most of the countries? Because healthcare may differ, or standard treatment may differ between countries. I've seen that in France, for instance, with we were comparing treatment for cartilage regeneration in the knee. And the comparator in the trials was the cultured cartilage cells, in lab cultured cartilage cells. And so that was very expensive treatment, very interesting. But in France, actually, it's not used at all, and it's not an accepted treatment. So their trials were completely useless to prove any benefits compared to the clinical practice in France. Verify whether there's clinical guidelines in the treatment area. Very important, especially once you start to move towards the market, towards launch. Because the treatment guidelines are being considered by decision makers as guiding their decisions, as helping them to decide what is current practice, which treatments should be funded. So the earlier you start talking with scientific societies and getting them in line to, that's a bit naughty to say get them in line, but getting them to work on their guidelines to develop improvements or modifications so that your new treatment can be in there is very important. What you should verify, are there health technology assessments in the treatment area? Are they positive? What is the level of data that was presented? So if there was a positive assessment with low level of the evidence, well, no reason why you would need a very high level of evidence. But the contrary is very true also. If there is a very high level of evidence for in that treatment area for treatments, well, you should be able to match that reference. Which outcomes are used, which minimal clinical important differences are used. All that is very important information for you to collect and to influence your strategy. Is this a priority area, the area you're working in? And can we make it one? Between your technology development and the time you will be going to market, the time you will be going to ask for reimbursement, you have a couple of years to start talking to patient advocacy groups, to start making noise about the importance of treating that specific disease that you are addressing. So this is more public affairs. This is more making the disease you are treating a real problem for society. And then once you come with your device or your treatment, it will be so much more important to fund it early on. And obviously, does the organization of care favor the introduction of new treatment? It's important to look at that. Sometimes there are perverse incentives, like, for instance, if you come with a new treatment for dialysis, in a lot of countries, it's very difficult. And when I worked in Baxter, we had actually that problem with when we tried to introduce peritoneal dialysis, that the decision maker I was addressing there in Belgium, they were owners of dialysis centers where they were really making a lot of money. So they were not interested to substitute that with peritoneal dialysis. So while doing your due diligence, also an important notion to think about is how do you position your device? Do you position it as a breakthrough innovation, incremental innovation, or do you have a Me Too product? It's really about the placement in the treatment continuum also. Which is your desired patient population? Is it first choice? Is it on a subgroup of patients? What's the epidemiology? You will also need that information to get funding from investors also, obviously. But towards your investments, your investors, your stressing how important that group is, how big that group is. Sometimes when you make your pitch to decision makers, you do want to not exaggerate with the number of patients that you could eventually treat.
Brigitte, this is
Yeah.
very interesting. We might take it up again another time, but I'm afraid you need to finish in 5 or 6 minutes. I'm sorry.
Okay, very good. No problem for me. So you will be able to look at those slides. It's really laying out the differences, the negative and the positive sides of choosing to position your product as breakthrough, incremental innovation, or a me too. And it will be important to look at that also when you decide on your pricing. So as I said, the important things to do when you set up your strategy for market access is your due diligence, your goal as an your average selling price goal, the timings. Are you in a hurry or do you have time? The choice of your product positioning, innovation, first line, patient subgroup, who will benefit. How can the advantages be sold to the decision makers? What are their interests of the decision makers with regards to that disease area and to those patients? What data are and will be needed to make the case to the different decision makers? And their really collaboration of clinical, regulatory, and market access strategy are really very important. We talked about HTA before. I guess you all know what it is. It's really about looking in a objective way to the clinical data that are available, but it's also a systematic way in which you look at the clinical data. So including both positive and negative studies, especially also the negative. Because otherwise you would be cherry picking, and that's not what an HTA would be doing. They look at all the studies and make a decision an objective decision based on those studies available. And HTA is used in different European countries and in different ways. So in France, where the HAS, the High Health Authority, it's upfront. I had a lot to do with them. It's if you are well prepared, it's not impossible to pass that barrier. UK, you have heard about NICE. Germany, the General Joint Federal Committee, IQWiC, DIMD, MDS, MDK, which are the insurance. They all do HTA, but for the moment, for the medical devices, GBA and IQWiC are the most important. Belgium, Austria, Switzerland, Spain, I'm not going to name them all, but they all do HTA, and it's very important to be prepared and to know what their requirements are going to be. So an example of support. So yes, and it's good that I wrote it down. So as an example of what I did in the last years, so I have a customer of mine which I met in 2014, and they were really hands in the hair and not knowing what to do. They had 2 RCTs that were proving actually that their therapy at that point didn't really meet the minimal clinical important differences in the outcomes. And what we did is we set up a strategy trying to find short-term wins. So where's the low-hanging fruit? Where don't I need clinical data to get to the market? Second, what data do I need to collect to be able to address the other markets? So we really started to look at what can you do short term, can you do medium term to get long term a good reimbursement in all the different European countries. So from from being nowhere in 2014, they do have market access in all the major European countries and even the smaller ones. So even Scotland and Norway, to say. So yes, we can help you to jump all those hurdles. The importance is to start in time and to think about all the different hurdles that you will need to jump in time.
So thank you very much, Brigitte. And I asked Brigitte to give this practical example at the end because, we didn't want a presentation that was just theory. We can actually, you can get support, you can get help. And yeah, so that's really important. I have a quick question before turning it to the floor. Brigitte, you showed us that there are many different health technology assessment organizations, that it can be quite strategic to have a good first HTA. And you also showed a slide with this name, EUNETA, so the European Network for Health Technology Assessment. Could you actually ask them, like, where do you recommend I do my first HTA? Or is that a crazy, suggestion?
No, it's not a crazy suggestion. EUNETA, what they do have is early dialogues. So they will have, because everything is, EUNETA project is ending now, and that will be now under the HTA regulation. So it is planned that there will be an early dialogue that will be possible with different HTA agencies. And that the aim there is that you go there during your clinical trial planning, so that eventually you can still make changes to your trials and then start them. They won't obviously guarantee you that will be sufficient, but at least you get a good feeling on what the pain points could be and where you need to pay attention. There's other agencies, just like the HAS in France. They do also early dialogues. They do also meetings, pre-submission meetings. So during that meeting, you can get the feeling of whether, with the data you're presenting to them, whether this file makes a chance to pass or not. So there is that possibility to get a better feeling on whether it's worth submitting or not.
Thank you. Questions from the floor? I see a question on the chat that says, how would you go about prevention or digital therapeutics? Is the question about prevention via digital therapeutics, or it's about both? Not quite clear. The question says
it's about both. Prevention, obviously using digital tools.
Okay, prevention with digital
tools.
So
in order to see the results of that prevention, that'll take a very long longitudinal study. So as a startup, you don't have that time. You might die in 6 months. And yeah, how would you go about that? Because the final goal is to be a digital therapeutic, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. That's where obviously you would need to go and do a thorough literature review on the diseases you are trying to prevent, and that could give you the argumentation on what your devices can deliver. Yeah, so if you prevent, let's say, stroke, and then you would need to get a percentage. Well, you could get an idea from the literature, the published literature, on what that brings to the population. And those obviously to be discussed again with the HTA agencies on what could be an acceptable form and format to present that.
So it kind of goes back to what Jan was saying as well, as quantifying the value that you're providing vis-a-vis what we have in the literature, what happens to these patients and what might happen to them if the prevention actually works.
The thing is, the thing with the prevention we're looking into is heart diseases in women, and there are not lots of data sets and how to prevent that. So not a lot of literature there, because obviously women present atypical symptoms when it comes to heart disease. They die, they didn't even know that they had heart disease or something similar.
Yeah.
So how would you go about, like, are there any case studies of that you've seen across that could offer some inspiration?
Not like that on my no, but I would think you would need to really understand the area and eventually go and talk with the agencies, just like for instance in France, and say, well, we have obviously you need to demonstrate something, so you will be working on intermediate outcomes or on surrogate outcomes in your studies.
Okay,
so the question is, how important are those surrogate outcomes, intermediate outcomes, and are they acceptable for those agencies? So you would need to go and discuss about that.
So that's good to hear that you can always have a conversation with the agencies.
Yes,
I think that's an important message. So thank you, Brigitte, for this really great presentation.
I would have a quick question, if I may.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah. So we do not actually have a product to sell, but we do have data that could be used as a real-world evidence or data or evidence, or actually leading to health outcomes. So I was just wondering how we should go about making sure that we collect the data in the best way to make sure that we can actually pull the right outcome data from it eventually. And then who are we selling it to? What are your thoughts about that?
This actually it's a growing area, right? People collecting or organizations collecting real world data. I'm not a specialist in analyzing clinical data. I'm a specialist in using clinical data, but I've had a lot of discussions with, amongst others, with other companies such as Cytel, etc. What they do is, if imagine you have a therapy where it's difficult to collect data in a control arm. It would not be very acceptable for the patients. Well, then real world data and go and picking in that data the right patients could help to build a synthetic, if you want, control arm to the studies that somebody is doing in the same area. So
we'd have to look for partnerships with within pharma or medtech to make sure that we're collecting the right data, matching their clinical trials.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Right. Thank you.
Right. Glad you could answer that, Brigitte. So thank you, Brigitte, and we'll have her contact information if you need to get in contact. I'd like to move on then to our last presentation. So we have Jérôme Michaud, and before we start, we will have a quick Mentimeter, but while the Mentimeter is pulled up, Jérôme is head of the initiative operations at P&G Healthcare. I think you have been there now coming up to 10 years. And before that, he also had a startup experience, and he comes to this world from the EPFL with a master in material science. And so let's go for the two quick questions, which link to the presentation coming up. So do you have experience partnering with corporates? And the number is shown on the board. We have 2 votes so far. Okay. So some experience out there, but some not at all.
And some strong experience. I will need to be careful on what I say, right? No, but let's build on each other, yes.
And then the next one, I think. Yes, are you interested to develop these kinds of partnerships? Okay.
Yes, tomorrow. Okay, time to think.
Okay.
So
So
thanks,
thank
Mark.
you, and Jerome, over to you.
Sure, and I will start sharing my screen. Let me know when you see it. So thank you, Brigitte, for covering your part. And one of the key challenges I would have is to keep us all grounded still. I know it's difficult sometimes to be staying concentrated on these topics. Let me just check.
You are started sharing. All good, yeah?
You see it? Great. And thanks for the introduction. Let me put this picture here. So as Martin was introducing me, I'm Jérôme Michaud. I'm leading initiative operations at P&G Healthcare. I've been working in healthcare for now 3 years in the innovation space for more than this. And this afternoon, what I want is to touch base a bit about innovation. Okay, so we've been talking about pricing, about market access, but it's all start with having a product, right? And I hope, as I have seen, some of you have interest to develop partnership that you have the product. Okay, but sometimes it's not only about product; it's about having the go-to-market strategy as well. So we'll touch base about that. And what I want is to use. I hope you don't see that. Okay, I will move that here. I want to use and share basically what we're going to be just covering as an agenda item. And there are 2 vectors that, when you're thinking about partnership, that are very important. And I will use this as a theme to explain and share a bit the experience at P&G. So first is about knowing your audience, so knowing who you're talking about. And actually, there are things that might be obvious, easy to find, and as you develop and you do your due diligence, there are information that are a bit less obvious. And I will share a couple of examples on that. So knowing first who you're talking to. And as usually you develop partnership, either really commercial, but here is with the theme of innovation, is knowing a bit about how innovation is managed at this target. And I'm going to be sharing a bit about how we manage innovation in P&G. Of course, you might have been talking with different ways of working. That's okay, but that just to illustrate why it's so important to know how innovation is managed. And we'll finish, of course, with Q&As, but it's getting ready. As I see there's some interest either today or tomorrow. It's about getting ready. So if you have questions, put that on the chat. We'll have a look later or interrupt me anytime, feel free. So a couple of numbers, maybe P&G rings a bell to some of you, maybe from others no. But in a nutshell, big FMCG company playing in many different fields. Okay, so you have a couple of numbers here. But what is about the importance of knowing is maybe it's straightforward, this or easy to, okay, Pampers, it's been made by P&G. There are brands that maybe are a bit less obvious. But behind that is how P&G or a corporate is organized. And why is that important? So a couple of bullet points here. P&G has a very strict business model. Okay, and this is important. Maybe business model does not speak that much for people, but the business model not only determines the responsibility of people depending on where they're sitting. Okay, it determines a lot about the decision-making process. So, for example, for P&G, we have our global workers in Cincinnati, in North America. In Europe, we have our headquarters in Geneva. But the business model will determine exactly what type of roles, what kind of decision making. So basically, when you do your stakeholder engagement, being clear of who I am going to talk with and a bit understanding the complexity, and a corporation is very complex from an organizational design. Okay, And I will illustrate with a couple of examples. But first, in top line, as you can see, as we're playing as P&G in many different kinds of fields, we have organized ourselves by sector of products and by business units. So there are 10 business units. So I'm working in the PHE business unit, and I'm working in the healthcare sector. Why do we have sector? It's because we want to scale operations from a commercial supply chain point of view. And why we organize by business unit? Because while scaling up operations, what we want is to be super focused into what are the consumers we target, what is our strategy, where to win, and how to win, and where to play. Okay. One other vector, because I was talking about the organizational design from a product point of view, is from a go-to-market. Because depending on where you're playing today and depending on what you want to develop as partnership, you might have a certain target market. We're talking with Bridget market access. What are these markets? Recently, P&G has restructured itself between, and they basically split the globe into two, what they call focus markets and what they call enterprise markets. Okay, so just to give you an example, focus markets, most of the European countries, very developed countries, and enterprise market are more the developing markets. What is the difference? Is the intent behind that is to drive more agility where there is a bigger growth potential and driving more power to the market in terms of how they manage the P&L. Because in majority of the cases, back to the business model, in Europe, in the headquarters, what is happening? If the headquarters is responsible for the entire P&L, profit and loss of P&G business, okay, responsible for brand building, master planning, defining the strategy, commercial one, but as well supply chain wise. They're responsible then for profit, and they are not responsible for sale. Okay, of course, sale creates as well profit, but it's more the markets. And when you look, a focus market in Switzerland will not have any ownership of profit. Okay, so they will have an interest when you come with an innovation. I want to grow my business. Okay, I want to target more consumers. I want actually to be able to have a different pricing strategy, more attractive. But it's not I won't care about the profit. I'm not responsible for the profit. Okay, and that will drive a different dynamic on how you could engage the conversation. Because if you target more a developing market and the enterprise umbrella, what we call in P&G, this market will have responsibility for the P&L as well, so for profit. So just this, maybe this is not obvious when you're coming from the external side, and you could be talking with a brand director in a market and in another market, but actually the interest of that person will be different. Okay? So knowing, this is more to illustrate, knowing first who you're talking to. This information might be easy to access on P&G website. This one as well will be accessible, but a bit more difficult. So I think we have a tendency sometimes not investing too much time into preparing for that conversation, being clear what you want, but as well being clear who you talk. I will illustrate with a few other examples. Did you know? A couple of facts. First, healthcare in P&G is the biggest segment we're playing in. More than $50 billion market in Europe. Fabric care, baby care, so you might know Ariel, you might know Pampers, is only a 10 to 15 billion market. Okay, so healthcare is super attractive for P&G. Sometimes we do not realize that. Second aspect, and I will come back to that later, P&G acquired Merck Consumer Health. Actually, the P&G healthcare site, which one of our top brand is called Vicks, has been as well acquired by P&G 20, 30 years ago. So knowing a bit as well the history and legacy of the business unit you're talking to can help you engaging in the conversation. Okay? A bit more specific in this, maybe not because we're not talking pregnancy here, but in the femtech area is actually P&G. There is a business unit integrated into P&G, but that's not fully owned by P&G. It's called Swiss Precision Diagnostics, and it's a joint venture with another company. Okay, so we are selling as well pregnancy and ovulation tests, but the fact that it's a joint venture changes a bit the dynamics in terms of organization design and decision making. Basically, there is a board 3 people from P&G, 3 people from Abbott, really defining the strategy for this SPD organization. While in P&G, usually the overall strategy comes from all the quarter, and then we have, of course, an oversight for the Europe market in Geneva. Last but not least, and that might be a particular interest for the startups, P&G has developed a startup innovation program. I will finish with that later in the presentation to really facilitate the collaboration. Okay, so these are again things that might be not obvious to find, but as you prepare for your due diligence, keep investing, keep deep diving to really narrow down really further who you're talking to. Okay, so that's to illustrate the who you're talking with. Then about innovation, knowing how innovation is managed. First, as many big corporate organizations and a lot of companies, I think all of us here are passionate about innovation. Innovation is key. Innovation is key to win against your competitors, to grow your business. So that has been and still is at the core of what P&G does. Remember maybe one of the number 70 billion business innovation every year returns pretty much $7.5 and $7 billion turnover. So you can think about that. 10% of the turnover of the company is dependent on the ability of P&G to innovate, either via product or commercial innovation. It's not always disruptive innovation. Okay, but there is a huge task force. In Geneva, there is no R&D center, but in Europe, we have a center. We have a couple of centers in Germany, in the UK, in Belgium, and many other locations. Okay, so innovation is key. And what has P&G has done? So first, again, I put because I like re-emphasizing the importance of organization. Okay, there is a clear hierarchical setup in terms of where the decision is made in terms of innovation portfolio. Okay, I will not focus that much on that because I already talked, but there is something that P&G has done a couple of decades ago. Okay, they created the discipline inside the company, which is called innovation diamond management. That's why you have a diamond, because it's pyramid. Okay, that support innovation. And what is the core of that? There are actually 3 vectors, and this is why you see the pyramid in 3 different colors. What is at the core of that is operationalizing the strategy. What does it mean? It's being close to the business, knowing where do you want to play, how do you want to win, okay, and making sure that's clear. What are my choices? So what do I want to do in terms of innovation? And as a consequence, what I want not to do. So being choiceful on that. There is another part, which is more the left side of this. You don't have to remember if it's right or left, but it's the left side of this, which is about portfolio management. It's not only about winning today, it's about winning tomorrow and winning in a couple of years from now. So it's about driving sufficiency, okay, working with R&D on front-end innovation, ensuring that we fuel a pipeline of innovation. So every business unit has a clear 3 to 5 master plan with innovation as a product commercial that defines how we can support the growth of the business due to the dependency, as I was saying, of innovation for the company. And last but not least, because these 2 parts are defining our strategy and ensuring that we define what are the right choices, then it's about doing it right. So it's about executing with excellence. And on this aspect, and I will explain why it's important when you're thinking about partnership, is P&G as well have thought about that as a stage gate process. Okay, so I hope this slide might be looking too much information and actually too small, but I will just explain. It's a stage gate process. So with clear milestone, with clear decision making, and it's a model that is used across every single business unit, across every single region. So good thing is if one day you've got the chance to develop a partnership with P&G or another corporate having a stage gate process, once you know that, you know a bit the dynamics, okay? You know who are the key players, and especially where and when can intervene. Because doing the right thing is a balance of moving fast, okay, and taking smart risks. What is matter of fact for me is in terms of partnership. So I remember from the first Mentimeter, there are not many people from the academia, but if we have 1 or 2 front-end innovation this is where we have a big corporation of R&D organization that is looking at, okay, what are the technologies we could develop? And actually we identify a technology and then we correlate this to a business need, okay? So this is happening before. And then when we have a business need, then we kick off that process. Usually we have the tendency now to work the other way around, which is knowing exactly our consumers. I have a consumer need and I need to define the technology. So you have two ways of thinking. But everything will be going through that, starting with, this is my business case. I know what I want to do, or not the exact what, but for the consumers, what is my business case? And then I will actually discover and design my innovation. This is where decision will be made simply as, do we have the capability internally? If no, what choices do I have? Do I want to go externally, develop partnership? Okay. Or for example, simply as outsource the manufacturing of some of the product because I don't have the capability, I don't have the licenses. Okay. What happened afterwards, the decision is made on that point of view. So everything is about the execution. But where really the partnership is developed is either with the academia, really upstream innovation, or then when we have prepared the business case as we design and prepare for the initiative. Okay, so this is a bit how innovation is managed at P&G. Now, I want to come back to one point before I was making about the acquisition of Merck and just explain. So hopefully this is an easy slide. There are only 3 pictures, okay? So P&G acquired Merck, Consumer Health, a group of Germany. So what does it mean? Beyond just the mix of culture, okay? It's about the mix of strategy. Is first, when P&G was thinking about the innovation, is looking what is interest, what can be the fit in terms of the strategy. The strategy of P&G was clear, is we want to expand our presence on the OTC business. We want to diversify our healthcare business. Okay, knowing the legacy of P&G acquired as well Vicks business 30 years ago demonstrated that, okay, we started playing in this field. This is very attractive for the company. We want to keep playing. We want to expand that business. We found an attractive organization. We're buying this attractive organization. So start with the strategy. And the same, if you're thinking about your own case, is okay. What is a win for me, but what is a win for as well the other entity on that acquisition or partnership. Now, when it comes to really the execution, we are merging 2 things. We're merging 2 ways of working and actually 2 cultures. So it's about starting again with this strategy. Where do we want to play? What are the segments we want to play? What are the innovation pipeline we had in our portfolio? What are the choices we'll make? Potentially we'll not keep doing the right choices. And this is the importance of having that culture in our DNA of doing and first focusing on the strategy, defining the right choices. And then, of course, it's about executing this, okay? Because with an acquisition, you merge culture, but you merge as well ways of doing. The organization is different. So, of course, is ensuring that you equip, and the stage gate process I was sharing before has been very fundamental for that we're in a position to keep having the right trigger, the right discipline, and not making investment where it's no longer needed. Okay? So these 2 parts were about the who. You're talking to how innovation is managed and share a bit how innovation can be influenced by an acquisition. Now, I promised to you, coming close to the end, that I will share about this P&G Startup Innovation Program. So I will just give you some highlights of what it is. Okay, so this is a global program. So we have hubs in many parts of the globe. In Europe, we have one in Paris, we have one in London, and we have one in Geneva, recently created, by the way, in Geneva. And the principle behind is the same that what you were saying before, is the business unit will come with, this is my portfolio of innovation for the next 3 to 5 years. This is my strategy, where I want to play and how I want to win. And at one point, I find a challenge. I don't have the resources. Potentially, either I don't have the capacity, I don't have the capability, I don't have access to the right technology. Okay. In that case, the business unit will prepare a business case, reach out to this internal startup innovation program that will then have a reach due to the collaboration they have developed in all parts of the globe to the startups. Okay, so we have a pool right now of a bit more than 6,000 startups to screen and define who is the best partner to work on this business case, develop and see then what is coming out of the pilot, of course, based on the business need and the interest of the startup. Okay, so just to explain how it works, to date, there has been a bit more than 100 projects active, 45 pilots. And of course, if you have some interest on that, I can give you with pleasure some information. Okay, so the intent for today was just to give you a nightlight, sharing a bit the insight of a corporate, and I hope this can give you a bit of areas where you can investigate if you're thinking about your business case. Now, every business case is different, so that's why what I can offer to you is, if you have questions, then we can stop here and ask. I think, Marta, we have a couple of minutes left before the end of the session, or of course, I will be as well.
We have time
for question afterwards. So thank you for listening, and time for questions. So I don't know if there are questions on the chat.
Well, I just want to make a quick comment. I mean, you can really see that you come from a consumer goods company, because consumer goods companies have to be extremely well organized. They have to have, perfect processes. I like your slogan that says you get better every day in terms of process, ideas, dollar performance, and happiness. And since I've had the chance to work with pharma and medtech, and I've seen a lot of consumer goods companies, it's amazing how you are by far the best organized, I would say, because you have very competitive markets and you don't have as high margins. And yeah, it's really nice to see that you give that you're growing in healthcare, and that you have an interest in new technologies in healthcare, and also that you've got this pilot process where you can pilot potentially selling a technology in a specific market, and you can learn from the pilot. It can help you decide whether this is an acquisition target or not. So maybe could you make one more comment about pilots to bring it to life for this team, Jérôme?
I'm not really allowed to share examples.
No, not examples, but how they are relevant to the decision-making process.
They're different, and I think the beauty of that is quite, as you can see, I mean, on the size of P&G with the number of innovation and the value we create, 45 pilots is not that huge. Okay, so it's very recent that P&G decided to invest in that external side, which is good, because that means there are a lot of opportunities. At the same time, it means we are learning, right? So how it is important, I think it depends as well what is the strategy for the business unit and what is exactly the content of the business case, because a business could be as simple as, I need a digital app to reach more users because of X, okay? And that's, I only need this, I don't need anything else. So I could get a partnership with a startup, but that's a one-off. So of course, if from the startup point of view, it could be a nice experience, it can be as well a good financial deal. But at the end of the day, the strategy of that startup is, I want to develop my business. That might not be the best illustration or example or thing to do in the long run. Okay, you still develop experience and contact. While it could have other business cases where it's not only about driving this one-off things, it's really about exploring a new segment. And SPD Swiss Precision Diagnostics is looking at that at this point in time. I will not share more. Today, they are selling ovulation and pregnancy test, but they are just deciding to invest much more on external innovation. Okay, and that can be there where you have business cases. Okay, we want to explore and we want to have a strong partner to explore together. And here that can lead to a potential acquisition at the end, or really a model that is a strong model of partnership. I don't know if that answers a bit your
yes,
question.
Absolutely, sure, yeah. I'm sure other people have questions.
Yeah, so the question, so organ and fit in, thank you, Eva, for raising. I actually don't know. Now, one thing, Merck is as well a big organization, so they have multiple different business units. What we acquired is a consumer goods, side of Merck. So I think Organon likely falls a bit more into I don't know actually which field, but a bit more technical field. So this one has nothing to do with the acquisition we made.
Okay.
Doing women's health, mainly women's health and biosimilars.
Thank you for the precision.
Okay.
Quick question from my side, and thank you so much for these insights. How, with this innovation between startups, are the startups finding you finding the startups, and do internal scouting? How can startups participate in your program? How can they access those business cases to see if there's something in that we can collaborate with? What will be the let's say the recommended advisable approach for that?
Yeah. So I will give you two answers. One first, which is how is the internal things and the external. So from an internal things, if a business unit has a business case, they will outsource the discussion with this P&G startup innovation program, and they will have no interference on the choices. They will, or at least on the screening. Okay, they will just get proposals. Okay, and then of course they will be the one deciding of with whom to go, but they will not be the one finding. Okay, or checking. It's the P&G startup. Now, what the P&G startup has done, and I will move to the external things, they have been investing in developing a relationship. So this hub in Geneva is in contact, for example, with the EPFL incubator, not only with the EPFL incubator, with many different incubators, okay, to really have access to these startups, but these startups in a pool. And then we have as well another company called Point 44, okay, that is responsible of doing the screening, okay. So coming back a bit more with you, tangible, how I could potentially be in this pool. If you're part of an incubator, you can reach to the head of the incubator, because this person should already have the direct contact. If he does not, or if you're not part of an incubator, just let me know and I can put you in contact.
Thank you so much for this answer. Obviously, we're part of Tech Forever, and wondering if how, like, understanding a little bit more about your focus when it comes to, let's say, digital products. Is P&G looking into digital products beyond, let's say, the molecules or the things that you have right now, let's say, from your business unit perspective, personal healthcare?
Of course, digital is important, so there are many opportunities. Now, is it one among the first priority from a technical aspect? I don't think so. But yeah, I think this one, if you want, we can touch base a bit so that I understand a bit more what's the technical solution you're talking about.
And you mentioned before an example about digital is a way for P&G to reach more customers potentially.
Yep.
That's one of the benefits that you're looking at for digital.
Yes. Yeah, on the digital aspect, there are lots of things internally, way of working, processes, analytics, of course, big data. That's a lot, but it's not that much relevant into consumer direct interface. It's more internal, but as well, there are lots of focus, of course, on how more we can go digital with that.
Okay. Other questions for Jérôme?
No, just to illustrate maybe with an example, which I know by coincidence, but is when you look, for example, in fertility, because I think it's as well a subject of femtech, there are a lot of new apps that are being developed which actually try to manage fertility, okay, just with analytics, okay? So it's not actually any product, anything, it's just using analytics to increase your chance of being pregnant, or if you're the husband not being pregnant but get some kids. So that's part of what these digital things. So there are lots of technologies like this, which could be, depending on the strategy of each business unit, be attractive.
Okay, good to know.
So thank you. Are you back the ball, Marta? I don't know if we have time for a final closeout.
Yes, sure.
Well,
Somebody wanted to ask another question?
Ree, can you tell us a little bit more of what type of innovations you're looking into in Geneva? You mentioned Geneva, London, Paris, and that. What exactly in Geneva?
So, I mean, the focus is not Geneva or London, it's just the hub that is closer to the startups. Okay, so whenever a business unit will raise a request or business case, it will go in the global set of hubs. All the hubs will be working on the case and say, you know what, on your specific case, I have a startup that is close to my hub that can be meeting your needs. So it's more location determined access. And then each business unit has access to the overall pool, and it's by the global presence of P&G that we have access to all the different pool of startups.
Sounds clear. Yeah, it makes sense. Okay.
Good.
Well, anything else? Thank you, Jérôme. Very nice presentation, very clear, view of what happens inside a very well-structured company, and good to know that you have these innovation hubs and that you're open to bringing in new products and ideas and apps in the field of healthcare. And that I was surprised that it's 50 out of 170 billion. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, so really important. Okay, thank you, everybody. There's a recording of this session. If you missed something, and if you need anything, you can contact Julie, the administrator. And yeah, thank you for being here this afternoon. And for those of you who are part of the focus group, Menopause, Incontinence, and Period Health, see you next week. We have a team meeting on the 30th of September. Thank you and goodbye.